All right. Welcome back, everybody, to the deep dive. We've got a really fascinating one to dig into today.
Yeah.
We're going to be talking about an episode of the Vice Diverse podcast. Have you heard of this one?
I have. Yeah, I've listened to a few of their episodes.
Yeah, it's interesting stuff. So this was episode 3, and it was called "What Will You Do to Manifest an Abundant Life?"
Interesting.
Yeah, and I thought, they have a very specific take on this idea of abundance, and I wanted to kind of unpack that a little bit today
Yeah, absolutely.
and see what we can learn from it. So just to kind of lay the groundwork here, they start off the episode by talking about, what does abundant life actually mean?
Right.
And it's not just about money, which is kind of what we tend to think of first, right?
Yeah, for sure. It's like the first thing you think of, like, oh, if I win the lottery, I'll have an abundant life.
Exactly. Yeah. But they're saying it's so much bigger than that. They're talking about well-being in all these different areas, like
Mhm.
your health, your relationships, your finances, obviously, but also your spiritual growth too.
Yeah, so it's like a holistic view of abundance, not just material wealth.
Right. Exactly. And they're saying that God's plan, like inherently, has this abundance built in for everyone.
Interesting.
And they even quote a Bible verse here. It's Jeremiah 29:11. I think you might be familiar with this one. It says,
Yeah.
"For I know the plans I have for you, declares the Lord, plans to prosper you and not to harm you, plans to give you hope and a future."
Powerful stuff, right?
Yeah. Yeah. So they're really emphasizing that God wants good things for us.
Yeah.
He wants us to have this abundance in our lives. But the catch is, and there's always a catch, right?
Right, there's gonna be, right.
You have to align your will with God's will. That's like the key to unlocking all of this.
Yeah. So it's not just about like wishing for abundance or hoping it'll fall into your lap.
No, no, you have to be actively, I think, participating in this somehow.
Yeah, exactly. Aligning yourself with that plan.
Right. But I mean, how practical is that, really?
Yeah.
Do you think?
Well, I mean, it's one thing to say align your will,
Right.
but how do you actually do that? And they do give some specific practices in the episode that I think are interesting.
Whoa, okay, like what kind of things?
So they talk about things like faith, obviously,
Yeah.
focus, taking inspired action, and things like meditation and visualization,
Okay.
affirmations, releasing fear and doubt. These are all things that we hear about a lot, in the self-help world, but they're framing it in this context of aligning with God's will.
I see. So it's like using these tools to kind of tap into that
Exactly.
divine plan.
Mm-hmm. And I think, it's interesting because these practices, they can be applied in different ways, right?
Yeah.
It's not like a one-size-fits-all kind of thing.
Right. If you had to pick one of those, which one do you think is the most powerful?
I find visualization really interesting
Right.
because they talk about visualizing the life that God has planned for you with all the blessings and abundance, right? And it's about creating that mental picture, reinforcing your faith, and opening yourself up to those possibilities.
Yeah, so it's like you're training your mind to see it before it actually happens.
Right, exactly. And it's interesting. I mean, visualization is used a lot in psychology and sports training to enhance performance.
Oh, that's true.
So there is like a real world connection to that.
Yeah, it's like training your brain to actually manifest those things, right?
Exactly.
So it's not just some woo-woo spiritual concept. There's some actual science behind it, maybe.
Yeah, I think there's something to that.
Yeah. Well, and speaking of things that are kind of mind-blowing, they bring up this point about how many times the word will appears in the Bible.
Oh, yeah, I remember that.
Did you catch the number? It's like
It's a huge number, right? Like 3,000 something?
3,836 times.
Wow, that's a lot.
Yeah. I mean, is that just coincidence, do you think, or?
I mean, I doubt it's a coincidence, right?
Right.
I mean, the sheer repetition of that word suggests that it has a really important role in our relationship with God.
Yeah.
It implies that we have to be active participants in this process, that we have to choose to align ourselves with his plan.
So it's not just about sitting back and waiting for it to happen.
No, not at all.
You're actually taking action, but it's action that's guided by your faith, by this idea of aligning your will with God's will.
Exactly. It's about recognizing the opportunities that come your way and having the courage to step into them, even if they're outside your comfort zone.
Yeah, it's interesting because they talk about this balance between being